So, Michael, now we turn our sights to another excellent production downtown in New York City.
Yes, Natasha and Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812, based on, I must say, my second favorite novel of all time. I hate to get a little pretentious on you, but I love War and Peace. Tolstoy wrote it, I believe, when he was 30, 31 or 32, and I read it when I was that age because I thought if he can write it at 31, if he can write a masterpiece at 31, at least I can read it at 31.
Well, that's right, and our guests include David Malloy, who at a very young age, I don't know if you're even 31 yet, has written the masterpiece of adapting a segment of War and Peace.
A few years past.
Oh, all right.
You've
adapted War and Peace, a little bit of War and Peace to become Natasha, Pierre, and the Great Comet of 1812. And you wrote the music, and you play Pierre. And then you have made this marvelous show, which has been pulled together and brilliantly directed by Rachel Chavkin in a show which is like, both, it trivializes it to call it dinner theater, but we're eating at the same time we're watching this musical.
This is on your program. You are at the opera.
And it is the hit of downtown New York. They've made a restaurant to do your play. And so I have to ask.
It's not a restaurant, it's a tent. They made a tent. There's a tent down there where I live.
In a tent.
Down in the
Restaurant
old
in a tent.
meatpacking district. There's now a tent. It's like Cirque du Soleil for Tolstoy.
It has walls, and you think you're inside a structure that's more substantial than a tent.
And air conditioning.
And it has a bathroom.
And the bathrooms are very good.
The bathrooms are
I must
very
say,
nice.
they're right out of Catherine the Great's Russia. You
Yes,
know, those porta potties are
and when
very
you're
nice.
not in Catherine the Great's restroom, you are in
But
Dave Malloy's.
Susan, we should explain to our viewers. So imagine you take Tolstoy's War and Peace, which I believe is about 900 pages.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Including this brilliant treatise about Napoleon and philosophy at the end that you guys don't use, and they have boiled it down.
There's one line.
There's
where
why
we refer to it. Yeah.
But they have taken this masterpiece of literature, and they've turned it into a snappy, fun, lively, off-Broadway dinner theater, again, I think is the wrong word to use for it, but the hottest show off Broadway right now. So how did you do it, and why did you do it? I mean, I got to ask you, David.
David, yeah.
So you're sitting around, I don't know, you went to Yale, comparative literature, you're reading War and Peace, and you think, you know what, this is dinner theater. War and Peace is dinner theater.
I actually read the book while I was working on a cruise ship. So I was playing piano on a cruise ship, I believe in either Bermuda or the Caribbean. I can't remember which one it was. I did several cruise ship stints in my 20s. So I had obviously a lot of spare time on my hands, so a lot of reading time, and actually had a girlfriend on land. And one of the ways that we stayed together was, similar to you, we said, okay, well, let's just take the biggest book ever, War and Peace, and let's read it together. We can do this.
I'm curious, though, what did you see in War and Peace that made you think this is a musical?
Oh, well, and it's just this like 70-page sliver of War and Peace. It's this very, very tightly compact love story, basically, about this woman, young girl, Natasha, who kind of falls for a roguish character and basically almost ruins herself. And that's told in parallel with the story of Pierre, who's kind of having this spiritual crisis in his life.
And you played Pierre.
And I played Pierre. And at the time I was reading it, I very much related to Pierre, because Pierre is kind of a social misfit and kind of awkward in groups. And I was working on this cruise ship where I didn't really fit in very well. I felt it was a very weird time. So what I liked about this particular section was that there's kind of these two stories running in parallel, and they only come together at the end. And it felt structurally like it really reminded me of classic musicals where you have like an A love story and a B love story. You've got Sky Masterson and you've got Nathan Detroit. And so we had those two
You have the two people who really should be together. They don't know they should be together until they've gone through the journey of the show.
Yeah, and in fact in our show they don't even really, they just kind of come together for a moment at the end of the show. And then 10 years later, they get married and all that, but that's.
Well, we know that. We
have a feeling.
But Rachel, now how did you get involved in it as the director? And why did you conceive of it as this sort of whole dinner theater?
Well, I think the dinner theater aspect came in part directly from Dave. Dave had this magical night in Moscow where he had found this sort of subterranean club.
You're on a cruise ship and you wind up in Moscow?
No. This was years and years later. So on the cruise ship, I read the book and realized that, and I kind of tucked the idea away in the back of my head. Oh, there's a 70-page sliver. One day I'll write an opera based on that. And then 6 or so years later, I got this commission from Ars Nova, and they said, you can do whatever you want. And I sheepishly proposed War and Peace, and they said yes. And so then as part of research for that, then I went to Russia.
So Ars Nova funded your trip to Russia?
Oh, no.
Did they really?
I went to Russia. No, they didn't fund the trip to Russia. I mean, they were great. They gave us developmental workshops, and for a year and a half or so, we developed it there.
But no trip to Russia.
But
So
no-
you
no
went to
trip
Russia, and then you got involved because?
Well, so Dave and I had worked together on 2 projects prior, and when we were working on, I guess, our first project together up at Vassar College, Dave mentioned, this was in 2009, and Dave mentioned this long time idea, sort of back of the brain idea, to adapt War and Peace into an opera. And so I think I began rereading the book then. And
I love this, rereading the book. Like, I read it when
I
I was a child.
had not really understood it, but I had read it. I had looked at the pages. And then Dave mentioned, sort of described this night he had in this cafe, and the idea that he had, there was a string trio that was playing in the cafe, and he'd ended up sitting next to the viola player and had this really intimate experience with the viola, but the cello was across the way, and wanted to have, take this idea of the musicians surrounding the audience and have vodka and dumplings, and wouldn't that be fun? And so Mimi, Leanne, our set designer, and I sort of took that and ran. And it felt very important to me to preserve certain aspects of period, which ends up being the costumes, because it seemed really important that the audience be able to release into the melodrama of the story. You can't meet Natasha with modern day sort of feminist morality. She just makes all the wrong choices. And you hopefully both want to wring her neck and embrace her at the end of the story. And so that was where sort of the period costumes came from, but then this contemporary club around came from a lot of Mimi's research. Mimi also got this random trip to Russia for another gig that she was doing and kind of came back with
We
these.
have to get on this gravy train.
Right?
This chicken Kiev train. I want to get to Russia too. I've never been there. You guys are like,
it's good.
Her description, well, I have not been to Russia actually yet, so hopefully for...
Well, hopefully we'll tour there.
Yeah, exactly.
But what was interesting about dinner theater is the wrong word. Opera actually is the right word. It is an opera. It is a sung through musical.
Oh, yeah.
There's no dialogue.
There's one tiny piece of dialogue at
Little
the end.
sliver of
Yeah.
it.
Yes, yes.
So when you were you wrote the music, right, for it? So what is the style of music that you're aiming for? Because it's not 19th century European, although it echoes that.
I mean, there
But
are
it
definitely
also is-
pieces of that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I definitely thinking about what the sound of the show would be, there were kind of a couple different worlds I looked to, and one was definitely period music, so 19th century Russian music. So I listened to a lot of Tchaikovsky and Borodin, and even a little later Rachmaninoff and things like that. So there's that kind of sound, and then also a lot of Russian folk music I was listening to. So that's why you have the accordion is in there and the guitars, and there's this beautiful scene in War and Peace where Natasha goes into the countryside and hears this guitar player who's playing these old
it's a
Russian folk
lovely scene.
songs. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, in addition to that, my own personal musical tastes kind of veer more towards, indie rock and electronica and things like that, and a lot of modern music which is really aggressively using electronic sounds, which I just really love. And so when I was looking at this story, so basically, Natasha starts off as this young innocent, and then she gets kind of electrified and sexualized by this character Anatol Kuragin who walks in. And so that felt like this dramaturgical justification to introduce electronica into the score as well. So that's where you have this kind of collision of sounds, where you have these Russian folk sounds and classical Russian music, but then also more contemporary electronic.
But also you send up our image of Russians. I mean, you're kind of playing with that notion of the Russian vibe and the strutting Russian guys. You do play a little bit with that kind of music then. We don't have the whirling dervishes. Well, that's Turkish. So we don't quite have, although they all kind of mix together in that part of the
Don
world.
Cossacks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
but we
there-
don't.
yeah, there
we
definitely
have
is
a little a
deep
bow to
Russian
the.
soul.
We think of Russians as
Yeah.
Cossacks here and there.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a little.
Well, in fact, my ancestry is Latvian, so I grew up, with going to these big Latvian parties where people actually would have these epic Latvian sing-alongs. It's not quite Russia, but it is still this very Slavic feeling of group drinking and group
Oh, yeah.
singing.
Oh, so that influenced you.
Well,
Oh, for sure.
when I was a student here in New York, we used to go out to Brighton Beach, where the Russian immigrants lived.
Sure.
And there was a restaurant out there, a Georgian restaurant. And I don't mean Atlanta, Georgia, but a Georgian, proper Georgian restaurant, which had a little tiny disco ball that would swirl around.
Yeah.
And there used to be weddings out there.
Yeah.
And they would start off boisterous and fun, but they would then drink so much, inevitably, they would wind up trying to kill each other at some point. But that's the Russian character that Tolstoy understands, that there is this passion and expansiveness and love, and the double-edged sword of that is that they can turn on a dime and slit your throat and kill you.
Yeah.
Totally, and
Well,
I
in
think
fact, we
that
have a duel.
Yeah, we have a duel, and
That
we
moment.
have
Yeah, absolutely.
that moment of. I mean, I think the idea of sort of decadence felt really, really important,
Yep.
which is in part why the space is made to feel so opulent.
Yep.
Because, of course, immediately after this section in the novel is when Napoleon descends on Moscow and the city will burn to the ground. And so sort of this idea of the Titanic, the band playing as the Titanic sinks, was something that I really wanted to get.
Very much so. You've captured
Yeah.
a world that is going to be obliterated.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so you
Within a
get
year.
that kind of violent drinking that you really only get in an incredibly cold culture, where you just need to pass the winter somehow, or a culture that is sort of so at the ends of an epoch, at the ends of a moment.
Right, but also you're dealing with a culture that it's been rich for so long.
Yeah.
It's kept all these people down for so long.
Yeah.
It's just lived on the backs of other people for so long, and it cannot go on.
What does that remind us of? Well,
Well, which is, I think, why
Is
the
that
contemporary
part of what you were
strands
thinking
work.
of? Yeah.
Absolutely. When Dave brought in the song that has become the duel song, that really heavy techno moment, it was like, oh yeah, I can see this happening now. It's the aristocracy partying away while while a massive army is marching towards it, and the city is headed for it.
That's how I feel as a Verizon wireless subscriber. The big old government has been listening in to my
Sure.
phone.
oh, and you know they have. And reading the mean emails you write me. All right, listen, before we go.
No, before I go, I want to ask you guys, you are unknown to this town. You're young, struggling artist, right? No, you're young, struggling. All of a sudden, you are now you have the hottest show off Broadway. Charles Isherwood in the New York Times is giving you a rave review. Have you all gotten agent up? Are you
both
now
had
looking to
agents
move to
go-
Broadway? Is everyone descending on you? Do they want you to write? Do the Weislers come to you and want you to write a musical for them? Do you have dreams of a Tony Award next year, David?
I mean,
Yes,
sure.
no,
Yes, no.
No, I mean,
yes,
be honest.
no,
I
yes.
ask a question. I mean,
No, I mean, it's definitely a very exciting time for the two of us.
Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely seen my life change a little bit and seeing new things.
when you say your
on
life
the
has changed, in
horizon.
what way? What do you mean?
Oh, just in the like new opportunities have come up, and it seems like opportunities I hadn't really thought of before, and in terms of going away from the downtown world, because we've definitely kind of grew up in the experimental downtown theater world, and so now to suddenly be kind of thrust onto this larger stage
You're a hit,
is
yep.
exciting. Yeah.
You know the difference between the downtown world and the uptown world? Money.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a big difference.
And you, have you the same experience? Are people
Yeah.
now coming to you as a director? We would like you to do something that we're going to pay you to do.
Yeah, it's lovely to get paid for it. Yeah, I mean, Dave and I have a couple new projects that we're getting to work on, and I think the challenge is how do you sort of stay ingenious?
Yeah.
How do you stay creative in sort of a fundamental way that poor theater demands that you do, because you don't have sort of the tricks that money can buy you? And so I think that's going to be a continued challenge.
And also, I mean, I think for me too, like just staying smart about
Yes.
what we're actually going to do next, and what to say yes to and what to say no to.
But I've seen this happen a lot, though. What you have to do is, since you now are in the hot seat, and you'll be in the cold seat again, believe me, because you might do the big one that fails, and
Oh, yeah.
you're on the scrap heap.
Your history.
But what you should do is, because a lot of people are going to you now with money, you should continue to pursue the things that you want to do.
Yes.
Just now, the people will give you money to do them, and it won't be quite so hard.
Yeah, maintaining that dream list is actually like one of the biggest responsibilities that I feel like is the largest change that I'm experiencing, is just the need to carve time in a way I hadn't before to maintain that dream list so that I'm ready when someone's like, what do you want to do? Here's a commission, here's a possibility.
And don't let them come to you and say, we would like you to direct, you know, I don't know, Ghostbusters 3.
Yes, not
You
yet.
say, actually, we would like to do...
three,
One.
One.
Not till your drug habit gets too expensive.
That's right. That's it. No, but you go to those people. You go to the Weislers and the Viertels and the Frankels and the Baruches and the Schuberts, and they come to you and they say, "What would you like to do?" And you say, "This is what we want to do. This is our next one."
But until then, it's Natasha Pierre, where they give you these shakers.
Yes.
They give you dinner. They give you shakers. Now, recently there was a notorious event which happened at your theater.
Oh.
Yes, and I wanted to get your take on that.
There have actually been countless notorious
No, but
events,
all right,
but there was one.
but
That's
the one,
because people drink at your show.
Yes.
but the one that
give them
made
shakers.
the one that made the papers, and you were there. Tell me what happened.
You know, from my perspective, I was actually playing piano at the time, and it was the beginning of, it's in the beginning of Act 2. It's like one of the biggest ballads in the show.
Oh, and
this
there's-
woman starts singing this beautiful song.
And the reviewer from there's a columnist from the National Review
Yep.
there.
Yeah, and I mean, what I heard at first was just like out of the corner of my eye, I like kind of heard some commotion. Then I looked up and I heard a very loud sound, like something hitting the ground. And then I saw this woman, and then I heard another sound which sounded like someone slapping someone. And then I saw a woman come down the steps and just march the entire length of the theater. And it's an immersive production,
Yeah.
so it's like she's just in front of everyone.
Yeah.
Right in front of the girl who's singing, and then march out the giant double doors and start yelling at our house manager and security.
Specifically
Now, what had
about-
happened? Yeah.
What had happened was
Okay.
she had been on her phone, texting or Googling or
During
something.
your play.
Not talking, but just with the
Yes,
light.
during the
And the light is very distracting because, like, I mean, she was literally this close to someone. And I guess the man had asked her several times during Act 1 to stop, and during the intermission, the house management and security had come and asked her to stop. And at the beginning of Act 2, she continued, and he said to her something like, "Can you please stop that?" And she's like, "Just don't look." And
She
and
said to him,
apparently- she
"Just
said,
don't
"Just
look."
don't look." And then apparently they had some other,
That
a
is
few
the
other
time
words.
You take the bottle of wine and smack it over her.
Well,
Luckily,
instead,
he
what
did
he did
not
was
do
he
that.
took the cell phone out of her hands and threw it across the theater and into a wall.
And what did she scream?
Well, she walked out of the doors and said, "Security, that man," and then the doors slammed shut on her. So I actually thought, because I was taking notes at the time with my assistant director who did witness it all, and I was looking elsewhere, and I thought that actually she had been molested up in the banquette, and that luckily turned out to not be the case, or at least molested in that type of variety. I think as a team we were kind of split about it because we had been very upset about sort of this rampant use of cell phones throughout the play. So this was a sort of epidemic versus a singular incident.
And yet the whole
so-
time you're kind of encouraging the audience to
Well, I mean, that's what's so
be
difficult
part of
about
this,
Yeah, it's the
this
fine
end
line.
of this era of all this drunkenness that is going on.
Yeah.
This
I mean,
decadent
one, people to
society
be
is
sitting
unraveling.
at tables together and meeting their neighbors and talking and laughing
not
a little bit.
texting.
But
But
not,
not
yeah, and it's
texting.
just like finding that fine line. And
But then they came and they made the guy who'd thrown the phone. What was his name? Do we remember his name?
heaven.
Well, we'll put it
William
here.
F. Buckley from the
Right,
National
no,
Review.
National Review.
Exactly.
Right, they made him leave, right?
They asked him to come out, I think, to try to address sort of what had happened, because I think at that point.
And you're
security
still
was
playing the
only
piano and
Oh,
the
yeah.
show's still going
getting-
on.
Oh, show
Yeah.
totally
He's
still
still
going
suing
on.
And I know they were both offered like tickets to other shows because
Yeah.
of, you know.
Well, she
to-
said
to-
she was
to
going to sue
reschedule.
him. Did that ever anything come?
I've
She
heard
is,
of
I
them
think,
before.
not sued him, but there were threats.
So there was a lot of posting. This got in all the papers. There was a lot of posting.
I had friends in London
I have to
asking
say,
about it.
I'm totally on his side because you know, you're right next to the person next to you. You're sitting like in a, and then but people defended it saying, well, the boundaries aren't there anymore because you're in a restaurant, so you don't know if you can text or not. And I'm thinking, well, you're watching a performance. There's people standing right there performing for you. You don't know that you have to not be rudely texting.
Yeah.
That's what's so appalling.
And I mean, I think the major sort of thing that you can say kind of against him is that he could have injured someone in the
Yes,
throwing
right,
of the phone. So it was probably not the best way to have
I know,
dealt
but on
with
the
it.
other hand, listen, you're pushing the boundaries with the theater. It's an immersive, I think, is your
Yeah.
word performance. People are eating. People are drinking.
Yeah.
If somebody stood up and started dancing,
It's happened.
would you incorporate their
Well,
dance?
again, it's a fine line. Like that happened like 2 nights ago. There's a scene where we are passing out letters,
Yeah.
and this woman got this letter to deliver to Natasha, and usually they just pass it like from audience member to audience member. But apparently this woman just like stood. I actually wasn't there that night, but this woman stood up and just like slow danced her way all the way across the theater to give it to Natasha. And the people described it as mom dancing. She was like, this, like older, 50-year-old woman, and,
I know, but
and it was
listen-
wonderful.
Mom dancing across the floor. At least you're being more involved. Whereas you're
totally.
texting.
Listen,
you're
there are-
Well,
removing
that's what
yourself.
it's all about for me. It's like
Yeah.
it's like if you're engaged and you're making noise, it's fine. If you're not engaged,
I know, but the thing though, as a performer, as you must know, I mean, if you're doing this immersive kind of theater, and you might have people who are drinking, who might get a little boisterous and carried away. As a great performer, you have to bring them into the moment, and then know exactly when to shut it down,
Totally.
and put them back with their date or their family, and that's old-fashioned showbiz.
oh yeah.
We got to wrap it up. The show is called Natasha and Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812 at a tent. It's a, what is it called?
It's the hippest spot in town. What do you call the club?
Casino.
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 Sounds like
Russian.
casino.
It's a wonderful evening.
It's a wonderful evening,
And you
it
get
was
black bread and
conceived and the
salmon
music by David Malloy and directed by Rachel Chavkin.
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 And Rachel Chavkin. I got it right.
Yes, you
Natasha and Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812 down at the, tell us again what the tent is called?
Casino.
The Casino. It's known as the Meatpacking District on 13th Street and Washington. And you're fired.